I come from a country, Lebanon used to be the only majority Christian country in the Middle East. Most people don't know that. When they think of the Middle East, they think it's all Islamic countries. But Lebanon is the only majority Christian country in the Middle East. We were open-minded, we were fair. We prided ourselves on our multiculturalism. We welcomed everyone to our country, especially from the surrounding Arabic countries, because we wanted to share with them the westernization which we had created in the heart of the Middle East. Muslims used to send their children to come study in our universities because we had built the best universities in the Middle East. They graduated and worked in our economy because we had built the best economy in the Middle East, even though we did not have any oil. Lebanon was known as Paris of the Middle East, the banking capital of the Middle East. And as Christians, we focused on education. Education was very important to us. You know, we educated girls and boys, you know, no difference. We were living the good time. Unfortunately, all that began to change by the 70s because of two things. The enlargement of the Islamic population in Lebanon, because we Christians marry one spouse until death do us part. We don't have many kids. Muslims, on the other hand, are allowed to marry up to 4 wives at a time. Now, of course, not all of them do it, but enough of them do it that in our country, in Lebanon, by the 70s, the Muslims became the majority. And once they became the majority, they started massacring the Christians and killing the Christians. I remember in 1974, we stopped traveling. We used to go spend Christmas and Easter in Beirut with the rest of my family. And we stopped traveling, and I would ask my father, why aren't we going to Beirut for Christmas this year? And my daddy would say to me, well, we just decided to stay home this year. And, you know, I couldn't understand why. And later I learned is because Muslims started setting up fly-by-night checkpoints, and they would stop Christian cars traveling. And when they would get people out of the car and look at their ID and find out that this is a Christian family traveling, because in Lebanon, our religion is written on our national ID, on your driver's license, on your passport. So when they see that this is a Christian family traveling, they would get everyone out of the car and shoot them in cold blood. So we became prisoners to our homes and our cities and our communities. And that's the reason why we stopped going anywhere. By 1975, that's when the war broke out, the civil war. And the war broke out because Muslims walked into a church on a Sunday morning and began shooting at Christian worshippers, and injured hundreds and killed 4 people. And that's what started out the all-out war. And it was a very difficult time for the Christians, because as the Muslims organized and now supported by the oil money flowing out of Saudi Arabia and all the Muslim countries, they wanted to basically use Lebanon as a base from which to fight Israel, kill the Jews and drive them into the sea, using Lebanese democracy and Lebanese open-mindedness and tolerance to do exactly that. And that's really when my world turned upside down and it changed. Lebanon was so multi-faith and multicultural. So we had Druze, Muslims, Christians, Protestant. The majority were Christians. We were over almost 70% Christians when we got our independence in the 40s. But because of the way Muslims multiply, you know, with the multiple wives and multiple kids, in 30 years, they became the majority. And when we got our independence from France in Lebanon, because we are, you know, Judeo-Christians, you know, come from Judeo-Christian culture, we're very fair. So we made sure we divided the government to make sure that Muslims have representation. So the president of the country was Christian, the prime minister was a Muslim, the prime minister, you know, the secretary of state. We had different assignments for different religions. But the Muslims became the majority. And once they became the majority, they were no longer tolerant of the people who took them in and accepted them and included them in the country. They felt they were not a part of the country. They felt they were a part of the Islamic Ummah or the Islamic nation. So when they turned against their brethren Christians who lived in the same country, and Jews, but especially the Christians, they began massacring us in large numbers because they thought we are in power now, and therefore we set the rules on how things should be.